Welcome back to the Cantina. In Part 1, Jason Wasulko gave us a look at Panda Baba and his partnership with Dr. Evison, a true wild card who couldn't be trusted. Hannah Bennett painted a portrait of regret through the eyes and thoughts of Kabe and the impact of a true friendship in Muftak. And I shared my take on the Cantina's bartender, Wooer, reconstructing his view of the tavern and who's allowed in it after a tense standoff with a bounty hunter. Those 3 stories became some of the chapters in a fan-created book that Jason gave out as swag at the event he helped create, an epic Star Wars collector's weekend in Georgia called Rogue Fun 2, Fun and Villainy. Jason asked 7 other Star Wars collectors to contribute stories based on any of the characters from the Cantina scene in the 1977 Star Wars film A New Hope. The guidelines were minimal, the possibilities were endless, and each author found a new and exciting angle for these strange and unique patrons of Chalmun's Cantina, also known as the Mos Eisley Cantina on the planet of Tatooine. As his swag gift for the event, Jason had 250 copies of the book published, and our DC friend Danny Katzel sponsored the creation of the hard copies. And while more than 200 of our collecting friends received a copy during the Rogue Fun 2 weekend, the stories were too good not to share with a wider audience. The crew was enthusiastic about publishing an audio version of the book as well, reading their stories in their own voices, and in the voices of the patrons to great effect. Jason's original idea harkened back to the Star Wars books created in the 1990s, known as the Tales From series. The collections expanded the Star Wars universe in new ways, using previously established characters, ones often formally relegated to the background. And fans explored these stories in tomes like the Tales from Jabba's Palace, Tales from the Empire, and Tales from the New Republic. And together, as collectors, fans, friends, and Rogue Fun attendees, we are continuing that writing tradition that began more than 30 years earlier, once again playing in the sandbox that George Lucas designed. This is part 2 of that wonderful swag project that made it to print. This is an exploration of those whose stories ran through the Mos Eisley Cantina. This is what happens when Star Wars fans collaborate and follow their imaginations to other planets. This is Tales of Scum and Villainy. And this is Star Wars, Prototypes and Production.
From Coruscant to Tatooine, and every planet in between, Star Wars, Prototypes and Production, with your host, David Quinn.
Vader. It's a trap!
Yes, Master.
Whoa, we're gonna have company!
Have to stand and fight.
The more you tighten your grip, Tom, the more star systems will slip through your fingers.
I want to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father.
The Force will be with you, always.
When Jason pitched the idea of a book of short stories as swag for Rogue Fun, the tale he used to illustrate his idea was the first one he received. It was written by Rogue Fun 2 co-creator Jerry Hancock and centered around the Rhodian who forever shot first, the green-skinned mercenary Greedo. Jerry and I became friends at the 2024 Rogue Fun event, where he presented a panel about the history of the Kenner toys in the Sears Holiday Wish books, which was where many Star Wars fans first saw these beloved toys. And Jerry's idea was so novel, so perfect, that my reaction was twofold. I couldn't wait to read his story, and I couldn't wait to be a part of the Tales project. Jerry's story captures what we loved about Star Wars as children. That's all I'll say about it, because you need to experience it for yourself. But I hope it brings a smile to your face. Here's Jerry to guide us back into the cantina with his story about Greedo.
The Glitter-Stem Spiders, Greedo's Tale by Jerry Hancock. Greedo trembled as he stood before Jabba the Hutt, staring down at his feet, partially out of shame but also out of fear that he might be standing on a trap door that led to the Hutt's Rancor pit. He had been sent on a very important mission to capture a given codebreaker who worked for the banking clan, but the valuable bounty had accidentally fallen to his death before Greedo could return him to Jabba and claim the handsome reward. He was certain that when he returned to the palace to report the debacle, Jabba would immediately feed him to something in his exotic menagerie. Jabba's booming voice echoed through the throne room when he responded with an intriguing question instead.
Agua uba plaita cluehorn, Greedo.
Don't you play the cluehorn, Greedo? At first, the slack-jawed Rhodian was completely blindsided by the proposition, but then quickly realized that this was not a question as much as it was a directive. Greedo's Uncle Alvaro had taught him to play Rhodian rumba on the cluehorn as a child, and his long, slender fingers allowed him to become quite proficient at the instrument over the years. Although Greedo aspired to follow in his father's footsteps to become a bounty hunter, he had always secretly dreamed of one day putting a band together. Of course, secrets don't last long on Tatooine's criminal underworld, and somehow Jabba the Hutt learned of Greedo's musical skills. Jabba's glassy pupils widened when he said,
Genie do nupa banda ta perform chi ma guest nolia ta throne room on Uba will make it happen. Moji could just killi Uba atima.
I need a new band to perform for my guest at the throne room, and you will make it happen, or I could just kill you now. Jabba had been actively looking for a new house band ever since Figrin Dan had worked off his gambling debt, and his band, the Modal Nodes, quickly fled to Mos Eisley Spaceport to take up a residency at Chalmun's Cantina. Greedo was clueless about where to start with putting together this musical project, but the task was certainly more appealing than becoming a snack for Jabba's pet Rancor, Patissa. As Greedo meticulously scoured Tatooine in a desperate search for potential musicians, he heard numerous rumors of some of the patrons at Chalmun's boisterously bragging to the Wookiee proprietor that he should hire them instead of those shifty, deceitful Bith in the Modal Nodes. Apparently, a local Snivian spicehead by the name of Tequil played the fizz, and had been a decent session musician before falling into a deep addiction. According to rumors floating around Mos Eisley, Tequil's performance was one of the most impressive of the auditions organized by Chalmun's manager and head bartender Wooer. Greedo knew that anyone capable of impressing that surly humanoid must have some serious musical chops, and his addiction would make him that much easier to manipulate. In addition, Greedo had heard rumors that one of Jabba's best spice runners, the Aquilish Ponda Baba, was desperately looking for work around the dusty spaceport to pay off a massive debt he had accumulated in his dealings with the Pike Syndicate. Not many locals knew it, but Ponda was quite an accomplished fanfare player prior to taking up a life of crime, and for the right price, perhaps Greedo could coerce him into taking part in his new musical group. If anything, he knew that Ponda would have plenty of spice to get Tequil on board for a few performances, and perhaps give Greedo the opportunity to get back in the good graces of Jabba the Hutt. If the blue-eyed Rhodian could convince these two to commit to the project, he would potentially have a decent jizzhorn section. However, he still needed someone who could play the omnibox, which was an exceptionally difficult instrument to master. This was certainly going to be the most challenging position to fill, but it was a critical component of jizz music, since it covered the lower rhythmic end of the musical spectrum and filled out the sound. Greedo deliberated for days of where he could find an omnibox player on Tatooine. He even briefly considered trying to steal tech more from the modal nodes after he'd heard about a conflict brewing within the group due to the band leader Figrindan's ongoing gambling habits. However, he knew Moore would never betray a fellow Bith, especially after everything the now infamous Jizz Band had been through together. Suddenly, Greedo's ear stalks perked up and his large blue eyes widened when he remembered a recent visit he made to a local botanist by the name of Momaw Nadon. Greedo collected native plant species from his homeworld of Rhodia as a hobby, and the Ithorian, known to Tatooine locals as Hammerhead, had recently helped him track down a very rare species of orchid for the tiny garden he kept at his hovel in town. Nadon had a secret underground garden on the outskirts of Mos Eisley, which only a handful of fellow botanists and plant geeks knew about. Greedo specifically remembered seeing an old omnibox sitting in a corner of one of his greenhouses and wondered if this towering Ithorian might actually know how to play it. Greedo quickly hopped into his speeder and made his way west to pay Nadon another visit. This lead could very well be the key to success in finishing out the band, as well as keeping himself well above the Tatooine sands. As Greedo made his way past the outskirts of Mos Eisley and into the borderlands of the Junlin Waste where Momaw Nadon's homestead was located, he began to hear a low rhythmic rumble that seemed to grow louder the further he drove into the mountains. As his speeder approached a line of moisture evaporators on the perimeter of the Ithorian's underground farm, Greedo began to recognize the familiar sound of an omnibox being played by an expert musician. He sat in his speeder for a few more moments to enjoy the music and even began to wonder if it was something pre-recorded because of the beautiful vocal harmonies that were accompanying the unique instrument. As soon as he stepped out of his speeder, the music abruptly stopped. The Rhodian had apparently triggered a perimeter alarm that alerted Nadon of his presence. Greedo eventually spied the lumbering Ithorian, making his way up the stairs to the surface, babbling in a series of clicks, grunts, and groans. He finally reached into the pocket of his tunic to produce a translator band that he quickly slipped over his massive head so both could communicate in their native tongues. "What do you want, Rhodian? I told you to never come out here unannounced. Imperial activity has been unusually heavy on Tatooine as of late, and I don't need you bringing me any unwanted attention." Greedo apologized profusely before complimenting him on his exceptional music skills. Greedo cautiously inquired, "I'm currently putting together a musical act and was curious to know if you might be interested in lending your talents." Nadon was hesitant at first until he learned that they would be performing at Jabba's palace. Although he was not fond of the criminal element of Tatooine, he knew he would be relatively safe at the palace since Imperials hardly ever interfered in the Hutt clan's business affairs. Not to mention, he was secretly hoping to make a few extra credits that he planned to donate to the Rebel Alliance and perhaps pick up some valuable intelligence in the process. The Ithorian asked what other musicians would be involved in the project, and Greedo simply replied that they were local talent that fit the bill, and that he was hoping to start rehearsals as soon as possible. During his search for band members, Greedo had also heard a rumor that Jabba was expecting a group of Pike emissaries from Kessel in the next few days, and he was looking to impress them with an evening of food, drink, and entertainment. This must have certainly been why the crime lord made such a surprising proposition to Greedo, which ultimately saved his worthless green hide for the time being. As the twins' sun set later that evening, the sneaky Rhodian made his way back to Chalmun's watering hole in Mos Eisley. He knew he would be able to find both Tequil and Ponda Baba there. If he was lucky, they might have already downed a few drinks, making them more agreeable to the idea. In the case of the Aqualish spice pirate, timing was everything, and hopefully he hadn't already imbibed so much that he was looking for a fight. Greedo pulled the two would-be musicians into a corner booth of the cantina and told them about the project. Surprisingly, both seemed very interested, particularly when he mentioned that it was for an event at Jabba's palace where the infamous gangster was planning to host members of the Pike gang. Tequil was simply looking to get his hands on cheap spice, but Ponda hoped it might be a good opportunity to renegotiate a new deal on the debt that he held with the syndicate. Earlier that day, Greedo found an abandoned compound out past Beggar's Canyon that would be suitable for rehearsals. He shared the coordinates with the other members, and they all agreed to meet there the following evening to run through a few songs and to get to know each other. Greedo was shocked with how easily the crazy plan had come together, and he thought to himself that he might pull this job off without a hitch for a change. Still, the biggest question that remained was, would this group of professional criminals turned musicians and an Athorian botanist from the Junlands sound good enough for Jabba and his esteemed guest? Or would they all end up in the belly of a sarlacc somewhere out in the Dune Sea? The next evening, the four would-be jizz whalers met at the isolated compound that Greedo had scouted out the previous day. Although Momal Nadon was very familiar with the structure, which had served as a rendezvous point for the Rebel Alliance on numerous occasions in the past, he didn't mention it to the others. Greedo's strategy for timing the meeting had paid off well, considering the suns had already set and the heat was subsiding for the day. Not to mention, both Ponda Baba and Tequil slept off the previous evening's festivities and seemed refreshed and clear-headed for the highly anticipated jam session. Although they were all familiar with each other from their frequent trips to Schalman's Cantina, Greedo took the opportunity to formally introduce everyone in hopes of easing any anxieties or suspicions. As they all entered the dusty room, everyone began unpacking and tuning their instruments in preparation for what would hopefully be a successful session. Greedo conveniently produced a bottle of Jawa juice, and everyone took a long pull to mellow the mood. Once the necessary preparations were completed and their sound amplification was in place, they discussed what to play first. It seemed everyone was quite familiar with most of the jizz standards of the day, so Greedo shouted out, "Lopty neck," and they launched into their first number. Greedo wailed on his clue horn while Ponda and Tequil backed him up with their respective instruments in the horn section. Momal completed the low-end rhythm and topped off everything with his powerful yet unique vocalizations. Having two mouths allowed him to sing both lead and harmonies simultaneously, making him an exceptional vocalist. As they finished the first number, the musical vibe was quickly growing between the four. When Greedo shouted out, "Mad About Me," without missing a beat, they seamlessly transitioned into the popular upbeat instrumental. The four continued to play and drink throughout the night and slowly realized they were creating something unique. The smile on Greedo's snout was apparent to all as he secretly understood that this musical output would not only save his hide, but perhaps get him back in the good graces of Jabba the Hutt. As the first of the Tatooine suns began to rise the following morning, the group was wrapping up a rousing rendition of Jedi Rocks, and they were giddy with excitement of what this little experiment could become. While everyone packed up their gear and reflected on the previous night, Tequil turned and asked, "So what do we call this band?" Both Greedo and Momal looked back at the scruffy Snivian with blank stares, as they both had other things on their mind at the moment. But Ponda boisterously shouted out, "Glitter Stem Spiders!" The others looked around at each other while considering their shared criminal origins and motives, shrugged and nodded. Greedo replied, "Sure, why not?" Everyone's eyes squinted as they stepped into the bright morning light from the dark shadows of the compound. Each member of the newly minted jizz band was actively reevaluating practically every personal plan they had had the night before. Ponda wondered how he would break the news to his partner in crime, Dr. Cornelius Evazin. Perhaps he would make enough credits from this new project to pay off his debt to the Pikes and pursue a new life of professional musician. Momal saw the project as an opportunity to not only earn fame and fortune, but to redeem himself on his beloved homeworld of Ethor. Greedo was still hopeful to earn back Jabba's trust just long enough to do one final job, collect a lucrative bounty, and walk away from his life of crime once and for all. Poor Tequil had but two things on his mind, a few grams of spice and a visit to the local brothel back in Mos Eisley. As the four prepared to depart, Greedo told the others that he would contact Jabba to arrange an audition at the palace and relay the details to everyone. As Greedo sped through Beggar's Canyon and prepared for the long drive back to Mos Eisley, he eagerly contacted Jabba's major domo Bib Fortuna to let him know he had successfully assembled the new band that Jabba had requested. Bib seemed impressed with the feat, considering Greedo's notorious failures in the past. He informed the Rhodian that Jabba wanted the group to report to the palace immediately for an audition and perhaps even a wardrobe fitting. Jabba had big plans for the event, and he wanted to be sure that his new house band looked and sounded the part. Greedo quickly radioed the others and told them to rendezvous in Bestine, and they could all ride together out beyond the Great Mesra Plateau to Jabba's palace. The suns were slowly setting later that evening as Greedo's overloaded speeder roared up the canyon towards the palace. He slowly backed into the cargo port where he was met by Bib Fortuna and a team of Nikto guards who were sent to help unload their gear and instruments. The band was overwhelmed with the reception and wondered if this was some sort of ruse to steal their equipment. Just then, Jabba himself slithered from the shadows and his booming voice welcomed the group. Greedo was shocked by Jabba's jubilation, which was a far cry from the tone he exhibited the last time they'd spoken. The gangster cheerfully informed them that he had the stage in his main throne room prepared for their performance and was eager to attend their debut of his new house band. The band was treated like royalty as they were escorted upstairs to the throne room, where they were offered the finest provisions and libations that credits could buy. As soon as their instruments were delivered to the stage, the exhausted performers proceeded to tune up for their debut audition. As Greedo looked up from the stage, he realized that a large audience of Jabba's denizens were already forming in anticipation of their performance. There was no time to be nervous now, so Greedo announced, "We're the Glitter-Stem Spiders," and launched into a rousing rendition of Madness and Mos Eisley. The crowd went wild and cheered with unbridled reverence, which in turn stoked the band's passion even more. Jabba's eyes widened with excitement as he radioed to his team of Rancor keepers that they would unfortunately have to find other arrangements for his favorite pet's evening meal. As Greedo and his weary bandmates stepped down from the main stage, a jubilant Jabba slivered forward and announced,
"Ye have Chima best seamstresses ta fit uba all fu proper stage wear no lia preparation chi do performance chi ta pike syndicate."
"I have arranged for my best seamstresses to fit you all with proper stage wear in preparation for your performance for the Pike Syndicate." At that moment, 2 Quarren females and a team of ATC series tailor droids quickly surrounded the group and began to take measurements of the 4 bewildered musicians. Once this was completed, the team scurried away to begin work on flamboyant fashions fit for Jabba's newest entertainers. Once the audience began to disperse, Greedo and his dumbfounded bandmates staggered up to a bar deep in the bowels of the palace to have a drink and reflect on one of the most extraordinary days that any of them had ever experienced. None of them had slept in almost 2 cycles, and the exhaustion combined with Jabba's bizarre reception, along with their own adrenaline-soaked performance, was almost more than the group could comprehend. After a few rounds of stronger drink, the quartet began searching for a quiet corner of the palace where they could get some much-needed rest. Even the bright light of Tatooine's twin suns could not penetrate the depths of Jabba's massive palace, so Greedo and his bandmates slept well into the next day. When he finally woke, the Rodian found himself sleeping in a bunkhouse within the palace guard's living quarters. After waking his cohorts, they all made their way over to the mess hall where one of Jabba's COO series cook droids prepared an exceptional made-to-order brunch for them. As they were finishing the last few bites of their meal, Bib Fortuna stopped by to inform them that Jabba had summoned them to an informal dress rehearsal to try on their new custom-made outfits. 2 Gamorrean guards were there to escort the band through the cavernous structure to the palace wardrobe where they could freshen up and get into their new stage vestments. After visiting the refresher and having a long, cool shower, the band entered a dressing area where the multi-armed GX series sewing assistant droid had laid out their fresh new attire. The droid was there to make any last-minute alterations to the garments and to be sure that they were fashionable and comfortable. Greedo's outfit was a bright chartreuse green flight suit with teal accents at the joints and a pair of matching teal spacer boots. Momal Nadon's outfit was a simple one-piece singlet in turquoise-colored leather, which would be much cooler and provided unrestricted movement while playing the challenging Omnibox instrument. Ponda Baba was provided with a form-fitting Gorman twill bodysuit that was topped off with a bright orange velvet singlet and a pair of polished black leather boots. Tequil was thrilled with his ensemble that included a deep blue tunic and matching pants, which featured black piping and a black belt. The impressive garb was accented with metallic silver spacer boots and a matching starbird belt buckle. Jabba entered the cloistered room to admire his new house band and applauded their new vestments. As the quartet exited the room and made their way upstairs to the throne room to greet Jabba's esteemed guest and to revel in their newfound fame, the gangster grabbed Greedo by the arm. Jabba quietly announced,
"Ye have placed due huge bounty on Ta Corellian Ulwan Han Solo on Ji Vopa Ta Choba Uba Ta Job."
I have placed a huge bounty on the Corellian smuggler Han Solo, and I would like to offer you the job. Greedo understood that this was an extremely lucrative opportunity that could be the big break he was looking for. The bounty on Solo would be more than enough to walk away from bounty hunting forever and to pursue a new life of fame and fortune. Before he could accept Jabba's generous offer, the gangster raised a tall glass of jet juice and proclaimed with a half-hearted smile,
"Ta-ta, glitter stem spiders, ha ha."
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I'll be honest, this is the first fiction I've written since I was in high school. I usually write nonfiction, but when Jason proposed this idea, I was fairly intrigued. I'll have to say, had I known the talent that he had pulled for this project, I probably would have declined, which is probably exactly why he didn't tell me who all was involved. I asked him, and he's like, "Oh, just a few people in the hobby. It'll be fun." As for inspiration for the story, I've always loved the colors that Kenner used for the Cantina aliens. And some folks refer to them as the Fab Four. My buddy Ryan Shaw, he always calls them the Fab Four. And that sort of sparked the idea with Hasbro's recent re-release of the Cantina Adventure set and the return of those gorgeous Kenner colors. I wondered how that might play into the stories of the individual characters. I think this played out. I actually had a weird dream one night. It was early one morning, just before I woke up, when we all have those weird dreams, about the four Cantina creatures creating a band. I don't know how it happened, but it just popped in my head and it felt right. So I used some of my own insights as a musician. I used to play in bands back in the 90s. That's a different story. To try and give the story some sort of a genuine feel, I guess. But it's been such an honor to be a part of this project, and I know that everybody involved, all the authors, really poured their heart and soul into this epic collection of stories. After Jason sent us the first rough of everybody's stories, and I had a chance to read everybody else's work, I was just really floored with the caliber of writing that everybody brought. You can really feel the passion, I think, of the stories in this collection, and I do hope it's not just another piece of swag, but a real highlight for the Rogue Fun event. I hope everybody enjoys it. Thanks for letting me be a part of it.
When Jason asked me to contribute a story, the first character that popped into my mind during that phone call was a woman named Jenny. While working on another project, I stumbled upon the black and white footage from the Cantina scene, with a number of shots that were never used. And one of them featured Han Solo sitting in a booth with Jenny, either a girlfriend or girl of interest. I thought it might be fun to explore her backstory, as she leaves just before Luke and Obi-Wan meet Han for the very first time. Before ending our phone call, I mentioned to Jason that Danny Katzel would probably be interested in participating in the book as well. Danny is a member of the Washington, D.C. area Star Wars Collecting Club, a writer for the Star Wars Collectors Archive, a Star Wars poster guru, a valued member of our community, and a dear friend. Less than an hour later, Jason contacted me. He told me that Danny had agreed to write a story for the Tales of Scum and Villainy book. And when Jason pitched the idea to him, the first character Danny asked to cover was none other than Jenny. I was happy to select another character and to see where Danny would take Jenny's story. And now you have that wonderful opportunity as well. I'm thankful that Danny chose Jenny, because he took the story in a direction that's far more interesting than anything I would have selected. And when speaking with Jason about Danny's story, he gave it what I thought was the nicest compliment a Star Wars writer could receive on a project like this. Jason commented that Danny captured the essence of the 1990s Tales books in the best possible way, in both his writing style and his attention to detail. Let's return to the cantina for one last time today, as Danny shares his story with us.
Sugar and Spice. Jenny's Tale by Danny Katzel. The door chime sounded. Rel was instantly awake. Her sore muscles groaned as she got out of her bunk and walked toward the door. Every step was agony. Yesterday's Terrace Kasi sparring lesson with her master had taken its toll. Rel pushed the door mechanism and it swished open. The corridor aboard the Vermilion, Crimson Dawn's mothership, was dim. All the other initiates on this deck were still asleep. Margot, the Immerusian aide to Rel's master, peered in from the threshold. Her sand-brown, scaly skin and dark brown eyes seemed to pierce Rel's soul with their gaze. Cool and calculating, Margot was the opposite of how Rel expected someone from the hot, volcano-covered planet of Immerusia to act. You have been given your first assignment. You leave in 15 minutes. Margot handed her a data card, a small purse, and a suitcase. Peeking inside the purse, Rel saw at least 1,000 Imperial credits, as well as Pegats, Trugits, and Whoopee. Hutt money, Rel exclaimed. She had never been to an area controlled by the Hutt clan, and couldn't wait to visit the Hutt homeworld Nal Hutta or its pirate haven moon, Nar Shaddaa. As if reading her mind with the Force, Margot tamped down her excitement. Don't get your hopes up, you're going to Tatooine. Rel studied her new identity listed on the chain code. Jenny? You look like a Jenny. Margot shrugged and turned to leave. Good luck. Rel opened up the suitcase and examined Jenny's clothes. Unlike Rel's form-fitting Agile Assassin jumpsuits, Jenny's suitcase was full of loose-fitting heavy robes to protect her from the twin suns and extreme heat. She used the refresher and quickly changed into one of the new outfits before heading down to the Vermilion's hangar. Tucked in the corner of the hangar was her heavily modified Cinar Fleet Systems GAT-12H skip ray blast boat, the Scamp, a former Imperial vessel about 2/3 the size of a YT-class Corellian freighter. The Scamp's heavy armor, proton torpedo launcher, 3 medium ion cannons, and concussion missile launcher were more than enough to go toe-to-toe with capital ships, and the dual-turret laser cannon could handle any fighters that tried to harass it along the way. Usually a blast boat required a crew of 4 to man all the stations and guns, but the Scamp was like no other. Crimson Dawn salvaged a super tactical droid brain from the Clone Wars and wired it into the ship. The droid could autonomously control the turrets, monitor sensors, and compute hyperspace coordinates all at the same time, meaning the Scamp only ever needed a single pilot. Rel called the droid Patch because it was patched into Scamp's augmented systems. Good morning, Patch. We have a mission. There wasn't any verbal response. Patch didn't have a vocoder installed, but the ship's systems activated and the running lights switched on. Rel had to carefully place herself into the pilot's chair, still trying to get the hang of her flowing robes. After running through a systems check with Patch, she eased the controls, and the repulsor lifts gently pushed the ship up and through the hangar's air shield. As the Scamp cleared Vermilion's wake, Rel rotated the blast boat's stabilizer fins from the landing horizontal position to the spacefaring vertical. The navicomputer chimed. Calculations for Tatooine were ready. Patch, prepare to jump to hyperspace. Here goes nothing. Rel thought as she pushed the lever on her console, and the stars that were mere pinpoints of light a moment ago elongated into streaks zooming past. It would take several hours to reach Tatooine in the Outer Rim, so Rel used that time to rest and learn her cover story. Jenny had just been kicked out of her home in Mos Espa because of her spice addiction. She hopes to start a new life in Mos Eisley, but she will need to meet with low-level spice dealers to feed her habit. While she buys hits of spice, she will learn all about the Pike Syndicate and the Hutt Clan's distribution network so she can disrupt it. Find your opponent's weakness and use it. That is Crimson Dawn's motto. Everyone thought Crimson Dawn, the most powerful of the 5 syndicates, was no more since its former leader Maul disappeared over 3 years ago. But like a nasty spider roach infestation, Crimson Dawn will lurk in the shadows while it regroups. Lady Kira, Rel's master and the new head of Crimson Dawn, will try to achieve what Maul desperately desired, to destroy the Sith. Lady Kira has been carefully attacking and stealing from the other syndicates so that when Crimson Dawn makes itself known again, it will still be on top. These attacks have been falsely attributed to the growing rebel movement against the Empire, which is the perfect cover. The rebels are too disorganized to know what each cell is doing, so even they don't know Crimson Dawn is responsible. Sowing discord and causing general mayhem throughout the galaxy keep Emperor Palpatine and his Sith apprentice Darth Vader distracted. As long as Vader is hunting down rebels, he won't see Kira until it's too late. The scamp dropped out of hyperspace. As the orange and white desert planet of Tatooine grew larger in the viewport, Patch sent falsified transponder codes to request landing. Rel's console showed that her ship had been granted a berth in Mos Eisley at Docking Bay 309. As the scamp entered Tatooine's atmosphere, Rel rotated the stabilizer fins to their horizontal atmospheric configuration and began her descent. After parking in the docking bay, Rel headed to the old quarter of the city, which was laid out like a wheel. She found a shabby apartment to rent off Spacer's Row, where she could track all the ships that came and went from the spaceport and all the shady humans and aliens as they walked around the spoke-like streets. Over the next several weeks, Rel tried to map out the spice operation. It astounded her that the Imperial garrison a few blocks away on Kerner Plaza could not do the same and shut the whole thing down. Jabba, the crime lord and head of the Hutt Clan's operation on Tatooine, must bribe the Imperial customs officials really well. The Pike Syndicate mined raw spice on the planet Kessel, and the Hutt Clan would send smugglers there to pick up shipments and take them to the Pike homeworld of Obadiah to get them processed. Then they would take the refined spice, Glitterstim, to distribution centers like Mos Eisley. The ships, the pilots, and the routes they took changed each time, so it was hard to predict where and when the next shipment would be. If only she could figure out the next shipment, then she could take out that pilot or blow up the ship in transit and make it look like a rebel attack. One day, while in Loop's general store, Jenny bumped into a handsome, rugged pilot only a few years older than she was. He had a hairy Wookiee companion who seemed more no-nonsense. "Hello, I'm Jenny. I just moved here from Mos Espa." "I'm Han Solo. This is Chewie. What brings a nice girl like you out here on the bad side of the Jutland wastes?" Baring her teeth, the wolf-like Shistavan owner cowled up, growled at that. She didn't like her store being referred to as on the bad side of anything. Han put his hands up. "I meant no offense." He grabbed the closest item for sale on the rack, a pair of Dubac leather gloves listed for twice the price they should be. "Here, I'll buy these. Keep the change." He tossed her a few credits. Turning back to Jenny, Han grinned. "Unfortunately, you can't buy your way out of every situation around here. You need to be careful." "Do you happen to know where I can get some spice?" Jenny inquired. "You don't want to get mixed up with that stuff," Han said, but trailed off when he saw that Jenny looked down to hide her shame. "But if you already are, there are always a few sellers hanging around the cantina down the street." Han swaggered off with Chewie in tow. "Let's get out of here before we gotta buy more overpriced junk," Han mumbled. From then on, Jenny spent hours at Chalmun's Spaceport Cantina every day chatting with small-time bounty hunters, renegades, and spice handlers. These spacers were quite happy to have the attention of a pretty young human and must have thought of her as just a bar girl trading companionship for her next spice fix. One name kept coming up in her conversations, Han Solo. So the next time she saw him in the cantina, she made her way over. It's a pity that Han would have to be killed to further Crimson Dawn's agenda, but Han is not innocent. He smuggles one of the most dangerous drugs in the galaxy. Extracting a vial of deadly toxin from her pocket, Rel carefully poured its contents into the glass of Tatooine sunburn she would give Han. Han was engrossed in conversation with Chewie in the Wookiee language Shuriwook. Few non-Wookiees understand it, so they must have assumed it would be safe to use in the cantina as a code, but Rel was fluent. Due to human vocal cords, Han couldn't make some of the Wookiee sounds, so his grammar and syntax weren't great, but he got his point across. Without making it obvious she was eavesdropping, Rel listened from the shadows. Taggart gave me the details for tonight's Kessel run, roared Chewie. This was her big break. Taggart was one of the dockmasters of the spaceport. He must be in charge of assigning the spice runs. This was going to be easy, not at all like that first time when we had to find a new shortcut through the mall, breaking the record, Han said in Basic. Chewie dismissed him with a grunt. Well, it is if you round down, retorted Han. Switching to broken Shriwook, Han lamented. But most of all, when I think ago, Kessel, I think her. 10 years. Really miss her. I think, where is her? Whoever this woman was, she must have really meant something. Feeling like this was a good time to interrupt, Rel walked up to Han from behind, her long brown hair brushed up against him. She rested one hand on his shoulder and gave it a gentle squeeze. Han, I got you a drink, she said in a quiet, sweet voice that could barely be heard. Still lost in his reverie, he said, Thanks, Kira. What did you call me? Rel panicked. The Wookiee guffawed. I'm sorry, that was my old girlfriend's name. Was he talking about Lady Kira? This changes everything. Rel couldn't destroy Han or his ship now. What would Lady Kira do if she found out that Rel killed her old boyfriend? Lady Kira never mentioned her past, but judging by his feelings, they were still in love. Rel tried to put herself in Kira's boots. It was too dangerous to run a secret organization and have a love life. Kira would want this to be kept quiet at all costs. Feigning being upset at being called someone else's name, Rel threw the spiked drink at Han, turning his white shirt yellow. Rel ran out of the exit directly to the docking bay. Once the scamp was in space, Rel ripped off a necklace that was always concealed under her many layers of clothes. On the necklace was a red and black charm, abstractly showing a rising sun. This was an encryption fob that was the only way to contact Crimson Dawn for emergencies. Rel took a chance. If she was wrong, it could cost her her life. She plugged the fob into her console, which activated a holo screen. A beautiful woman with short brown hair came into view. Lady Kira herself. Yes, Rel, what's wrong? Kira inquired. Han Solo will be smuggling spice on the next run, Rel blurted out. He leaves tonight. Kira was silent for a moment. Rel purposely left out any mention of Han's slip or that she knew that they were former lovers. Let's see how Kira responds, she thought. If I'm wrong, my career is over. Is Chewbacca still with him? Yes, Chewie is always by his side. Good. We have to stop that shipment without harming them. Kira took a deep breath. Her eyes wandered away from the screen, lost in thought. I have a plan. Take the scamp and meet me at these coordinates. The navicomputer chimed. Patch received the coordinates and a new course plot was ready. Yes, my lady. Rel terminated the transmission and jumped to hyperspace. Rel and Kira were aboard the Scamp in deep space at the jump zone of a little-known hyperspace lane between Obadiah and Tatooine that Kira said Han had used before. Any ships that traversed this lane had to drop out of hyperspace here and recompute their next jump using updates from the local nav buoy. That gave them a window of about 5 minutes to capture the cargo on the Millennium Falcon, which Rel learned was the name of Han's ship. Sensors pinged. Patch detected a ship exiting hyperspace heading their way. It was the Falcon. Kira smiled at the tiny dot in the viewport. He never replaced the escape pod. Rel had never seen her smile before. Kira hesitated before pressing a button on her wrist gauntlet. Suddenly, a huge gray arrowhead-shaped ship with 3 giant repulsor tractor beam emitters materialized from hyperspace, towering over the Falcon. The Cantwell-class arrestor cruiser was designed by the Empire to catch smugglers and pirates. Crimson Dawn only had one, which Lady Kira used sparingly to impersonate Imperial patrols. Kira recalled, Han served on a Cantwell-class once. It didn't go well. Find your opponent's weakness and use it. The cruiser signaled the Falcon. Unidentified craft. This is an Imperial inspection. Shut off your engines and prepare to be boarded. The Falcon turned and tried to run, but the Scamp was already on an intercept course. Its 3 ion cannons made quick work with the Falcon's shields and disabled half the other systems before Han jettisoned the cargo. Kira berated Rel. That's enough. Remember the plan. Make sure he can get away. We have what we wanted. Rel pulled up and let the Falcon limp away. Before the cruiser was within tractor beam range, the Falcon jumped to hyperspace. Rel docked with the cruiser while it tractored in the spice containers. Lady Kira's plan worked perfectly. Han claimed the imps tried to board him and he had to drop his cargo. Jabba knows that couldn't have happened. The bribed Imperials wouldn't cross him, but he had to pay the Pikes back for the lost shipment. Crimson Dawn agents captured Taggart the Dockmaster for an interrogation. His absence halted spice runs, which infuriated Jabba even more. Without Taggart, Han hasn't found any work, and spends most of his days in the cantina trying to scrounge up charter flights to pay Jabba back. Back on Tatooine, Rel resumed her role as Jenny with a new assignment: keep an eye on Han. Jabba thought Han stole the spice and put a bounty on his head to get his money back. Luckily, Jabba likes Han too much to have him killed, but Rel would watch his back just in case any two-flan bounty hunter tried to escalate things. Jenny was sitting in the cantina one day talking to a Rhodian when she noticed a familiar-looking old man and a young farm boy enter the cantina. Crimson Dawn had been looking for surviving Jedi to aid in their fight against the Sith. As part of her training, Rel had to memorize the faces of all the Jedi that escaped the Purge decades ago. This old man looks just like Obi-Wan Kenobi, but appears much too old. Could he have used the Force to make himself look older, as part of a disguise? Or had decades under the twin suns of Tatooine had this effect on him? The old man moved up to the bar, so she found Han, whose booth had a better point of view. There wasn't much room, so she sat in his lap. Hello, oh yeah, Jenny from Mos Espa. Han said, at least he remembered my name this time. At the bar, the old man was speaking with Chewbacca, and they were pointing at her. Rel had to think fast. She turned to Han, running her hands through his hair. Just then, the farm boy got into a scuffle with an ill-tempered Aqualish and a scarred human. That's when the distinctive snap hiss of a lightsaber igniting made the loud bar go deathly silent. Rel saw the pair get cut down by the saber. That's definitely Obi-Wan. Just as she thought that, Kenobi turned to look right at her again. Did he use the Force to read her mind? To hide, she grabbed Han, who looked horrified at the carnage, and gave his surprised face a big kiss. Han gave her a very perplexed look when she pulled away, then looked past her to see that Obi-Wan, Chewie, and the farm boy were walking toward them. Han addressed them. Nice moves, old man. Very impressive. Then he looked back at Rel, looking a bit embarrassed. Sweetheart, and motioned her to leave. He didn't need to tell her twice. She smiled at Obi-Wan as she got up. Rel passed a pair of stormtroopers on the stairs of the cantina, and even more on the street. There was a much larger Imperial presence here than usual. Were they here for Kenobi? He must be chartering safe passage off-planet with Han to escape. She had to tell Lady Kira right away that she found Obi-Wan Kenobi. She pulled out her comlink, patched, "Get the ship ready. We're leaving." The end. This is Danny Katzel. When Jason asked if I wanted to write a short story a la the Tales of novellas, I immediately thought of Jenny, the woman who was making out with Han in the cantina. All of her scenes were cut in the edit room. Like so many of the original Tales of stories, I wanted my story to cover the actual moments from the movie, so I watched the first cut, Elstree-only version of the cantina scene that still had Jenny in it. The shots of her and Han are juxtaposed with Obi-Wan cutting Walrus Man's arm off. In the original novelization, it says when Luke and Ben walk up to Han's booth, "At their approach, the man sent a humanoid wench who had been sitting on his lap on her way with a whispered something, which left a wide if inhuman grin on her face." Checking my collection for other mentions of Jenny, I only found 2 other sources. One of them is the Inside the Worlds of Star Wars trilogy from 2004. In it, the cross-section of the cantina art shows Han and Jenny sitting in the booth with text saying, "Taggart was a smuggler who specialized in moving shipments of glitter-stim spice. Fellow smuggler Han Solo flirted with Mos Eisley B-girl Jenny on Tatooine while waiting for news from Taggart. The news never came, however, as Solo was forced to change plans after an old man asked for transport to Alderaan. I made sure Taggart was in my story too, and that something happens to him so he can't meet with Han." The only other mention of Jenny is from a 2015 young adult novel called The Princess, the Scoundrel, and the Farm Boy. In that book, Han has a scene with, quote, Jenny from Mos Espa, where she comes up to him and he doesn't remember her because he has different girls at each spaceport and calls her the wrong name, and she gets upset and throws her drink on him and storms off. I wanted to incorporate all those scenes and dialogue into my story. George Lucas borrows heavily from Kurosawa movies, and I wanted to use an unreferenced one too. Jenny isn't even the character's real name. I think that's actually the actress's name, so she's a woman with no name. I thought of Yojimbo, or rather the spaghetti western Clint Eastwood remake, A Fistful of Dollars. In that movie, the man with no name comes to town, and there are 2 rival gangs trying to control it, and he's able to play them off each other. So that became the central idea of my story. Of course, the end of Fistful of Dollars has that famous bulletproof vest scene, which is probably featured in the Back to the Future movies. I had an idea that Jenny had a hidden Beskar breastplate under her robe, and at the end maybe she gets shot and fakes her death, but I didn't end up using that. The Hutts control the spice on Tatooine, and I remembered in the Book of Boba Fett, the Pike Syndicate was also secretly trying to establish a base there and take control away from the Hutts. So that could be the 2 gangs that are fighting. And if Jenny comes to Tatooine to disrupt this spice trade, who is she and what's her motivation? And then it hit me, it could be Crimson Dawn. They're a rival syndicate, and at this time period, Kira is the leader, and that makes really interesting Han interactions. Does Kira know that Han works for the Hutts? What if Jenny tries to kill Han? At one point, I had also considered maybe having Kira send Jenny to Tatooine to watch over Han during all this to make sure he's safe. I rechecked the modern comic books, and Kira doesn't come out and announce the return of Crimson Dawn until after The Empire Strikes Back. And there's this whole subplot in the comics with Kira and Crimson Dawn trying to track down Jedi survivors and recruit them in their fight against the Sith. So I wanted to try to include something like that too. And I realized that was a good way to have Jenny leave when she spots Obi-Wan. I tried to have a lot of 90s video game references. So in the Solo movie, Kira uses Teras Kasi, which is a martial art that non-Force users can use to fight against Force wielders. So Kira teaches Jenny that too. Teras Kasi is from a terrible 90s PlayStation 1 Star Wars fighting game. And originally, I had this really long Andor-style spy thriller idea where Jenny has Terras Kasi fight scenes, and she takes out all these different spice smugglers and things. And I dug out all the strategy guides for that old game to try to get the names of the various fighting moves so I could incorporate them into the story. But as I started to write this, it was just too long, so I had to cut it all out. The idea of the nav buoys and hyperspace lanes that the travelers have to temporarily jump into real space to update their navicomputers so they're vulnerable for attack are from the 90s PC flight simulator games like X-Wing, TIE Fighter, X-Wing vs. TIE Fighter, and X-Wing Alliance. I mentioned to my kids that I was going to write a Star Wars short story for Rogue Fun, and they wanted to be included also. And when I used to write short stories with them, their favorite stuffed animals, who were named Scamp and Patch, were the main characters of those stories. So they asked, could I include Scamp and Patch in my story as well? And those two names sound like they could be low-level goons working for Java, I guess. So maybe they're people that Jenny spies on or fights. And they said, no, they can't have their favorite stuffed animals be bad guys. So I had to incorporate their names somehow without making them bad guys. Eventually, I realized that Jenny will need a ship, and I could name the ship the Scamp. So that was one name down. And I went through my old EU books and remembered that the Skip Ray blast boat was a pretty cool ship. So I went through the complete guide to Star Wars vehicles, and I made sure that not only did I get the specs for the blast boat right, but apparently there were multiple versions of the blast boat, so I had to make sure I used the right one, the GAT-12H, which was released before the Battle of Yavin. Later models that had even more bells and whistles on it came out after the Battle of Yavin, and I didn't want to be the guy to mess that up, and you guys called me out on that. So that book says that while a single pilot can fly a blast boat, it's best to have a crew of 4 man all the stations. And that's when I realized I could incorporate more modern-era stuff in and add a tactical droid brain plugged into the system to help fly it, and I could name that droid Patch. And that way Patch and Scamp are together, and there aren't bad guys, so that's perfect. Let's see, what else? I should also mention that Jenny's real name in my story is Rel, which was a nickname that my wife had in college, so I get all the references to my family members in there. All the names of the stores and streets in Mos Eisley in my story are locations from the locations book, like Carl Lupp's General Store and Spacer's Row, and that the Imperial Garrison was on Kerner Plaza, and that's also a reference to the original ILM address on Kerner Boulevard. Obviously, with a character named Jenny, I had to reference the song, so Jenny parks in Docking Bay 309. I did check, and according to the locations book, the Mos Eisley docking bays only have 360-something docking bays, so I couldn't go higher than that anyway. Jenny pours a drink on Han that's a Tatooine Sunburn, which is a drink from the original Tales of Mos Eisley Cantina book. And I made sure to note that when she throws her drink on Han, it stains his shirt yellow. I guess that's an Easter egg. I always felt that Han's shirt changes color a few times between white and like off yellow. I don't know if that's a color timing thing or some problem in the VHS, but I'm making it official. He has 2 shirts, and one of them is stained yellow because of Jenny. When I realized I could incorporate Han's dropping Jabba's cargo off in my story and have Jenny and Kira be responsible, I made sure to put a Cantwell-class arrestor cruiser in. And of course, that's the original design of the Star Destroyer by Colin Cantwell in 1975. And it finally almost appeared on screen in the Solo movie, but that scene was cut, where Han was a TIE pilot assigned to a Cantwell-class ship. And then it appeared again in Andor, where it was given the designation of arrestor cruiser and was used to hunt pirates and smuggler ships. So I thought that was appropriate for Kira to use to spook Han. In my haste to make everything fit, I had too much tell instead of show in my early drafts, and I'm thankful to my early draft reviewers like my sister Amy and my friend, Star Wars collector and budding author herself, Annie Levinsky. With their helpful pointers, all the tell instead of show parts were changed to be scenes with Han to move the story along. Oh, and fellow story writer Sean Meinheim also did a final polish of all of our stories as a final check before it went to print, so thanks to him as well. I'm so proud that I could combine all those beta canon Jenny references and the Han dropping the cargo shipment into one coherent story, and that I could also connect it to the modern era canon stuff with Kira and Crimson Dawn versus the Sith. That's just the icing on the cake. I also want to point out that I wrote this story in middle of March so we can get to print before Rogue Fun, which is before the new Maul Shadow Lord show comes out, so I hope nothing in that show contradicts anything in my story. For the audiobook recording, I did all the sound effects myself. For Chewie, I found public domain bear, lion, and walrus recordings and mixed them together forwards and backwards and at various speeds to create kind of like Ben Burt sound effects to make a passable Wookiee sound. And for Han, I copied what they did in the Solo movie to make like a pigeon Shariwook, and my years of practice mimicking Angus McGonagall, the Argyle gargoyle who gargles Gershwin from the Mark Hamill Muppet Show episode, came in very handy. This was such a fun experience, and I can't thank Jason enough for allowing me to contribute.
Thank you for joining us for part 2 of the fan-made Tales of Scum and Villainy anthology. I hope these stories rekindle the fondest memories of growing up with Star Wars and exploring the fascinating creatures George Lucas sprinkled among the galaxy he brought to life beginning in 1977. Another huge thank you to Jason Wasulko for spearheading this project. It has been one of the most enjoyable things I've done as a fan and as a collector. And the thing that many of us love the most about it is that we did it together, as a group of fans and collectors. To stretch our imaginations and to flesh out the characters that often had mere seconds of screen time has been an exercise in creativity that none of us will ever forget. I'd like to say a special thank you to Danny Katzel for sponsoring the publication of the books and for helping to make the idea a reality that today is in the hands of our fellow collectors. And thanks to Danny and to Jerry Hancock for composing the stories within this episode, and for recording the audio versions of these tales. I will never look at Greedo or Jenny the same way again, and that is a blessing. We have a few more stories awaiting us in the exciting finale of the series. We'll return to the cantina to spend some time at the bar with Akmina, and we'll follow the Snaggletooth Tequil as he goes on his own side quest. And we'll wade through a special fever dream with our glorious hammerhead friend, Momo and Adon. That's all for now. Don't forget to pay your tab, and don't forget your droids either. Or ask them to wait outside earlier, and they're probably getting restless. The Tales crew and I will meet you back here tomorrow for more Tales of Scum and Villainy, here on Star Wars, Prototypes and Production.